Most Americans picture the same war. China moves on Taiwan. America steps in. Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines fall in beside it. Beijing gets surrounded. That war doesn't exist, because when the shooting starts, there are no patriots in the Pacific, only businessmen. Taiwan's own chipmaker is already slipping out the back door to Arizona. Japan wants America to fight its fight. Seoul will find a reason to stay home. Which leaves the one question Washington forgot to ask before Vietnam. If America goes to war for Taiwan, who actually stands with it? First, give Taiwan its due. It matters more than most Americans realize. That one island makes the overwhelming majority of the world's most advanced computer chips, by most industry estimates, north of 90%. The phones Americans carry, the new trucks in their driveways, the artificial intelligence every network keeps promising will change everything, none of it runs without Taiwan. Even American giants like Apple and Nvidia build their brains on that island, 100 miles off the coast of China. Lose Taiwan. And America doesn't just lose a supplier. It loses the factory that runs the modern world and hands it straight to Beijing, which is exactly what makes what comes next so dangerous. Because something can be this important and still not be worth a war. Start with the part nobody in Washington likes to say out loud. Taiwan isn't actually an ally. America has real defense treaties with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and all of NATO. Written promises that say, in plain terms, if you're attacked, America comes. Taiwan has nothing like that. America once had such a treaty with Taiwan, and it tore it up in 1979 to make friends with Beijing instead. So what is Taiwan to America really? It's a factory that sells America its chips and a customer that buys America's weapons. Money moves in both directions, but a promise to fight was never part of the deal. America will happily sell Taiwan the guns. It just never agreed to stand beside it and pull the trigger. And that, quietly, is the whole plan. Arm the island well enough, and maybe America never has to show up at all. Now weigh it the way a businessman would. What does America actually gain by going to war for Taiwan? Credibility, deterrence, a rules-based order. Big, important-sounding words, but words all the same. And what would it lose? Thousands of American sailors. Aircraft carriers sunk in the Pacific. The chips stop overnight, so a new car, a new phone, a new refrigerator suddenly costs double. Prices climb on everything, because the two biggest economies on Earth just stopped doing business. Retirement savings evaporate, and behind all of it, two nuclear powers staring each other down. One bad night away from something nobody can undo. One side of that is a slogan, the other is dead sailors, empty store shelves, and a market crash. It doesn't take a calculator to see which side weighs more. Of course, America wouldn't be going in alone. That's the whole point of having allies. So look at them, one at a time, starting with the one that matters most, Japan. Of all Taiwan's neighbors, Japan is the one that cares most, and for cold reasons, not warm ones. Taiwan sits right on Japan's doorstep. Its nearest island, Yonaguni, is barely 70 miles away, and the sea routes that carry Japan's oil and trade run right past Taiwan's coast. If China takes the island, Chinese warships and aircraft would sit directly across the routes Japan depends on. To Tokyo, a Chinese Taiwan is a threat to Japan itself. And Japan hasn't just been watching. It's been arming and fast racing to hit 2% of its economy in defense spending. 2 years ahead of schedule, buying long-range missiles that can strike back, and lining its southern islands with the weapons to hold them. In November 2025, Japan's Prime Minister said out loud what leaders there used to only whisper: a Chinese attack on Taiwan could threaten Japan's very survival and force Japan to fight. So no, Japan isn't simply hiding behind America. But here's the catch. Even Japan, the country with the most to lose, sitting right next door, still won't say the one sentence that actually matters, that it will fight for Taiwan. What it says instead is, maybe, it depends. It keeps the final decision firmly in its own hands. And if the neighbor with the most on the line still won't make that promise, it's worth asking how solid anyone else's will be. Those words alone came at a real price. Japan never fired a shot. It just made a statement in Parliament. Yet China suspended Japanese seafood imports, tightened export controls on the rare earth materials Japan's factories depend on, and cut back flights between the two countries. If simply talking about Taiwan costs that much, imagine the price of fighting for it. That's exactly why everyone else keeps quiet. And there's one thing Japan can't control at all. If America fights, it fights from Japanese soil, from the bases on Okinawa, which means China would strike Japan in the opening hours, whether Japan had chosen a side or not. In the end, Japan is arming for one reason above all. So that day never comes. Japan keeps its promise vague. And so, it turns out, does America. For decades, America has run its Taiwan policy on a single rule. Never say what it would actually do. That isn't an accident, it's deliberate. And it even has a name: strategic ambiguity. Washington won't tell China it will defend Taiwan. And it won't promise Taiwan either. Everyone is left guessing, on purpose. And under Trump, America has wanted to carry less, not more. His message has been blunt: pay for your own defense. He's compared America to an insurance company, complained that Taiwan doesn't give us anything, and said it ought to pay America for protection. An island, in his words, an ocean away from America and sitting right on China's doorstep. So the real picture looks like this. Japan wants America to commit first. America wants Japan and Taiwan to commit first. Each one stands there, waiting for the other to step forward. Which is why, after decades of calling each other allies, they still haven't agreed on the basics. Who fires the first shot? Who hits which target? Who's actually in command? Where America sees an alliance, China sees hesitation. And hesitation is something it can use. Because China's smartest move may not be a grand invasion at all, the kind that shocks the Allies into finally standing together. It may be a slow squeeze that never forces them to choose. Remember that ring of allies from the map, the one that made China look surrounded. Look at it one country at a time, and it starts to come apart. Take South Korea. It has exactly one enemy that keeps it up at night: North Korea, right on its border. If war erupts over Taiwan, Korea can't afford to send its army off to fight it. The North might seize that very moment to strike. Its current president campaigned on staying out of exactly this kind of fight, openly questioning why Korea should get involved in a quarrel between Taiwan and China at all. In office, he's kept that same distance, calling for neutrality while Japan and China clash over Taiwan, and reaffirming Korea's respect for Beijing's One China position. Rather than lining up against Beijing, Seoul has spent the past year mending fences with it. Instead, he and China's leader have now met twice within a few months. China is Korea's biggest trading partner, and a war would gut its economy. Korea will give America warm words. It won't give it troops. Then there's Australia, supposedly the ally America can count on, the one that signed the AUKUS submarine deal. But those submarines won't arrive until the 2030s and 2040s. In a war fought this decade, they simply don't exist. What Australia can really offer is intelligence and the use of its bases, not a fleet steaming into battle. And China is its #1 customer, Canberra will help, quietly, carefully, but it won't be rushing to the front. And the Philippines sits just south of Taiwan and lets America use its bases, which matters enormously. But letting America launch from its soil and going to war itself are two very different things. The instant those bases come into play, China marks the Philippines as a target, and Manila knows it. It will lend America the runway. It has no intention of lending it the war. So look at that ring of allies one more time. Japan, trapped by geography. Korea, pinned down by the north. Australia, moving slowly. The Philippines, handing over a base, but not a single soldier. On the map, America has friends in every direction. In an actual war, its real coalition might come down to just two: America and a Japan that never had a choice. There was a time when America gave the word, and its allies fell in line behind it. That time is over. Trump wanted the allies to pay more so America could carry less, and he pushed them hard to get there. On defense spending, on tariffs, on trade. He treated allies less like partners and more like rivals. But pressure like that doesn't buy loyalty. It buys resentment and it buys doubt. Iran showed exactly how that plays out. In 2025, America struck Iran's nuclear sites with barely a word to its allies beforehand. And when it turned around and asked them to help carry the risk, they kept their distance. Britain's Prime Minister made it plain his country would not be dragged into a wider war, and even limited America's use of a key British base for it. Nearly every ally quietly agreed America had been right to strike, and not one of them was willing to help pay for it. The Gulf states went further still, refusing to let America use their airspace or their bases against Iran at all. And ever since, several of them have been quietly hedging their security bets toward China instead. And Iran was only the smaller test, a weaker country, no nuclear arsenal. If America's allies wouldn't share that fight, there's little reason to think they'll share a far larger one. A war against China, over an island most of them won't even call an ally. America is still the most powerful military on Earth, and it isn't even close. But raw strength and the ability to fight a war with allies at its side are two very different things. Military power is what starts a war. Allies are what let a country keep fighting one. They share the bases, the burden, and the bill. A war with China wouldn't be fought off America's coast. It would be fought thousands of miles away, from islands and harbors America doesn't own. Without allies, America can barely reach that fight, let alone pay for it. So a country can have the finest ships, the finest aircraft, and the best trained soldiers in the world, and still end up fighting alone, because the allies it was counting on took one look at the cost and decided it was more than they were willing to pay. And that's the real danger. It isn't that America is weak. America is strong enough to start a war with China tomorrow. The trouble is that it's no longer trusted enough to get anyone else to help pay for it. So what is America supposed to do? Not hand Taiwan to China. Taiwan isn't America's to give away, and letting Beijing take it would cost America dearly, in chips, in credibility, in every ally watching to see what an American promise is really worth. But not walk blindly into a war with China either, alone, on the wrong side of an ocean. There is a third path, and it's the one America has quietly walked for years. Arm Taiwan until attacking it would cost China more than China is willing to lose. Keep the island loaded with weapons, keep the tension frozen, and never actually fire a shot. Not peace, not war, just a standoff that holds the way the line between North and South Korea has held since 1953. But don't mistake that standoff for a reluctant compromise. It's a business. A frozen Taiwan is the best customer America's weapons industry has seen in a generation, every missile sold, every year the tension holds. Japan just rewrote its own laws so it can start exporting weapons too. Taiwan buys and never stops. Nobody in that arrangement actually wants the war, but nobody wants it resolved either. The tension itself is the product, and as long as everyone at the table is a businessman, the deal holds. Everybody gets paid, and the shooting never starts. Everybody, that is, except one. Japan, Korea, Australia, America, all of them are running a ledger, and a frozen standoff pays every one of them. China is not. For Beijing, Taiwan was never a business decision. It's the one thing it will pay almost any price for. That's the crack running underneath the whole arrangement. A table full of businessmen, and one player who isn't playing for money. And the war in Iran just showed the world how that game is played. When the fighting flared, the threat that rattled every capital wasn't an army, it was the tankers. Choke the ships in a narrow strait, and you squeeze a nation without firing on it. China was watching, because Taiwan is an island that imports almost everything that keeps it alive. And here is the number that should stop anyone cold. The natural gas that runs its power grid lasts only about 2 weeks. Not 2 years, 2 weeks. China doesn't need to storm the beaches. It just needs to turn the ships around and wait. In roughly a fortnight, the lights, the factories, the chip machines that the whole world depends on, all of it goes dark. Long before any Allied fleet could even agree on a plan, Taiwan would be standing in the dark, deciding whether an island can really hold out with 2 weeks of fuel and no one coming. That's why China can afford to be patient, and why its smartest move isn't the invasion everyone pictures. It's the slow squeeze, a blockade, that never gives America a single clear moment to rally anyone at all. This isn't about abandoning Taiwan. It's about seeing the war clearly before it starts. Taiwan matters, but a war with China, fought nearly alone for an island America never even promised to defend, may be the one bill in this whole business that America can't afford to pay.